Welcome back, everybody, to Recycled Screenings. I have to remember people can see us here. I'm not in podcast mode. Joined by my very good friend, the one and only Johannes Binotto, one of my absolute favorite artists, scholars, and people. um, and we are here today to talk about really one of my favorite of your works. That's you complete metaleptic attack. Did I pronounce that right? Metaleptic attack. Um, and you finished this work a couple of years ago, right? And then 'cause I remember you sent it to me then. And I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing! When can I share this?" And but it's actually been playing at festivals and in various other contexts. So we're very excited to have the digital premiere, the exclusive here on Recycled Screenings. So Johannes, welcome to the platform. It's lovely to see you as always.
Well, it's so great to be here, and the honor is all mine.
And so I know who you are, but perhaps for someone who's here watching for the first time and is maybe just maybe has a passing familiarity with you and your work, could you just give it just a general introduction to kind of you and your background, and also the kind of work you make, which we could be here for a day talking about that, but just in general.
Yes. Well, I'm a film literature and in general media scholar in Switzerland, um, and became like a video essayist. Started making video essays. First, just kind of like trying things out, and it was literally because of like the resonance with a handful of people, or actually with like two people, and you are one of them, that really kind of like changed the whole trajectory of my life almost. Kind of like that appreciated what I did, and so kind of like I moved head on into continuing making video essays. And what I found out is also that I gravitated more and more also kind of like towards experimental filmmaking. So in Switzerland, I also teach in Lucerne at a film school, where people are mostly kind of like producing documentary and essayistic films. And so it's only kind of like, yeah, in the course of working with video essays that I also start to consider myself also an experimental filmmaker, whatever that means. Um, yeah, and since then has also I'm leading a research project here in Switzerland also on the video essay, kind of like using video essays in academic research, and teaching. So that's me.
Well, you and I are forever linked because writing about your video Truffaut was, I think, my first ever published piece of film criticism, writing, whatever. And so I've followed your career from the beginning. I'm the Bogdanovich to your Wells or something. Like, but I say that because it's been very interesting for me in watching your work to kind of see that evolution. But at the same time, I think this piece that we're talking about today, if we go back and look at some of your, I guess, your earlier works, like a Facing film or a Truffaut, there's so many similarities between those works and this one. So we should get into that later. But first, I think one of the things that I love so much about having this opportunity to talk on Recycled Screenings is to get that context that we sometimes don't get when we encounter a film at a festival or online. And this is a work that I think is so um, it so begs the question of how was this made? What was the process like? So, could you talk to us about how you got the idea for this video essay? Like, what is the origin story behind this work? I'm dying to hear it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a piece that is very dear to me because it literally came out of just like process of actually, and it is very much like linked to um machines and media machines doing something on their own. So the genesis of this piece is actually that I um made myself some like very glitchy, very bad. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm really not kind of like a technician. I made some kind of like very glitchy video mixers, some very simple ones, and then I bought another one that is called, I have it here, the Shele mixer by an artist from the Netherlands, Gies Gieskes, who makes these like electronic art, but also sells these devices that he made. So I received that thing, and I just thought, okay, I want to try this out. I want to try out what happens when I bend analog video signal with that. And I thought it would be nice to do this with a Hitchcock film. First of all, because we are because it's interesting, because we probably are familiar with how it's supposed to look. So kind of like the bending is perhaps like all the more interesting, but it was also just like something that was ready at hand. And then there were also some other reasons that actually, but only became more clear to me later. So then I was really fascinated of like what the cathode ray tube of this old TV that I was working with, what the cathode ray tube produced as visuals. And then I thought, oh, I think I'll need to record this. And from there, kind of like I developed some thoughts about that I thought this particular scene that I'm working on, which is the first major attack of the birds in the film of the same title by Hitchcock, that I thought it's interesting to kind of like to glitch and bend and destroy the video signal of that particular scene, because then the attack of the birds would no longer remain just like on the level of the diegesis of the narration. It would not just be like a scene in which you see characters being attacked by these birds, but it would actually look like as if the birds are attacking the film, or rather the video material itself. So that kind of like, which is then also what is meant with the term metalepsis. Metalepsis means a kind of like a switching. It's a term from literary studies. It means kind of like when you switch from one level to the other, when you switch from the level of like the narrator to the level of narration. It's these things when in novels, like in a Jorge Luis Borges novel, when like the author of the novel that you're reading is all of a sudden appearing within the novel. That is kind of like a metaleptic effect.
Mm.
Um, so and but it really developed out of like of the practice of like trying out. It's very much a piece that is not something that you can plan. And what I also really love about it, it's also impossible to repeat. I mean, I have the mixer, of course, and I could again like bend the video signal of that scene, but it would not look the same. So it's really actually also a performance. In a way, it's a recorded performance.
Oh, absolutely. I want to get to that performativity uh, aspect in a second. But so on a just so we can orient ourselves. So you are filming your television,
Yeah.
and so are you filming it? What are you filming
With my iPhone.
with your iPhone? And so was it for you? How many I guess how many rehearsals did you go through? Like how many times did you try this out? Like how many instances are on the cutting room floor? Like talk to us more about that kind of nuts
Mhm.
and bolts experimentation process.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm not sure anymore, but not too many rehearsals, and that is actually something that is also very important to me. And I think also something that people working in performance art would be very well aware of, that you must be careful of like not over rehearsing things, because um, when you're still in like a process in which you're not sure of what's going to happen, the level of attention that you have, of concentration, is much higher than when you have already a feeling of kind of like, okay, and then I will do this and then I will do that. So it is much more like um like a jam session
Mm.
with what the cathode ray tube does, what the film material in the cathode ray tube does, what the mixer does, and then me working on the mixer, trying to react on the spot to kind of
Mhm.
like to the images. And some of the things are kind of like you immediately react to something that you see, but sometimes also it's just like you've turned a knob and then you're surprised, oh, this happened, and now I have to react to this.
Right. And
And I think just
yeah, go
to
ahead.
add kind of like quickly here, and I think what I so love about this is that this is something that normally, particularly like as an academic scholar, this is not something you're used to. Rather, as academic scholars, we would be trained to kind of like to be very careful to only present something when we're absolutely sure and have like everything bolstered up with the right amount of footnotes, and kind of like that you always kind of project this image of like I know what I'm doing here.
Mhm.
Whereas in performance art, it's very much kind of like that you open up yourself to the accidental, to the things that are going on, and that is actually what to me is so very exciting. Which is nonetheless does not mean that it's just like that not a lot of thought went into it. There are a lot of also implications, and it has also a lot to do with like film studies and film history and certain kind of like and also very particular things about that it is this film by Hitchcock that I did this. But still there's also just like a lot of like experimentation and things going on that I could not control, and I did not want to control.
Mm. Wh- I mentioned a work like Facing Film, for example, which if you're watching this and you're not familiar with it, please go on to Johannes's Vimeo and watch that now. But that essentially deals with stagecoach and the materiality, the skin of film and its blemishes. What is it about? And video has been part of your work as well in the past. What is it that about video that you find appealing uh, to work with on an artistic level, but perhaps also on a philosophical, theoretical level?
I think it's the fact that the video signal is actually it's actually not even a visual medium. It looks on a screen, it looks as if there are images, but actually, if you would record a TV screen, um, an analog TV screen with like a high speed camera, you would see that it's actually just a light dot that is moving across the scene. So what you perceive as images is actually a construction that you make in your head. So this means that in the transition from film to video. And remember, I mean, in film, if you think about the film strip, you at least have like still kind of like photographic images. Like the one frame is still kind of like a complete photographic image. That is, you no longer have that in video, but what you rather have is kind of like a total fragmentation, um, um, an image signal kind of like changed into just like an electric current. Now, since it is translated into an electric current, so really kind of like there's no visuality there anymore. It's really just like different levels of electricity. That also means, oh, then I could kind of like add or deduct levels of electricity, and then kind of like the signal changes, and with that also the image would change, which is exactly what you see in metaleptic attack.
Hmm.
So in a way, these experiments, and of course I'm kind of like I'm here in a very long tradition that kind of like started with, I mean, you had in your video essay podcast conversation also like about the work of Namjoon Pike, who of course kind of like worked on that. Namjoon Pike would bend the video signal that was just kind of like what was transmitted from the TV stations at the time. It wasn't even his own footage, but he would kind of like just bend the signal of like the official TV stations. So, and I'm kind of like I'm linking myself to this tradition, and by doing that, I think you reveal also something about the nature of this particular medium. That you reveal that these bent and glitchy, maybe also like disturbing or kind of like just noisy images. This is actually, I could claim, this is actually the normal case. That you have stable images that look that resemble cinema,
Mm.
that is actually the exception, and it's only due to a lot of like standardization that it looks like film, but it's not. It's something else completely.
Did you first see the birds on television or VHS? When did you first watch it?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, I certainly first came across the birds on VHS.
Hmm. And what is your relationship been like with that film?
It's it's a film that I that I really do not like to watch. I find it an incredibly uh, depressing film in in many regards. Also, in a way, a very cold film, but also a very fascinating one. And what I became fascinated with, in particular, is kind of like in realizing how much of an experimental film it already was for Hitchcock.
Hmm.
That actually, I mean, you mentioned the Truffaut video essay, and when we think about like the interview that Truffaut, this long interview Truffaut made with Hitchcock, it's actually right at the time also when Hitchcock finished The Birds, and there's kind of like a lot of talk about this film, and it's interesting to see that Hitchcock is very concerned actually with like technical questions of this film. So um, Hitchcock would, and that is kind of like, I guess, pretty well known, would use for the soundtrack not an orchestral soundtrack, but would use these sounds made by the German musician, composer, and technological pioneer Oskar Sala, and actually also the sounds of the birds. And now what we are hearing in the birds is actually like a precursor of the synthesizer. And Hitchcock would be kind of like very interested. To some extent, it almost seems like, okay, that is one of the reasons why to make this film altogether, kind of like to
Mm.
experiment with this new medium of like the electronic synthesizer. So that was then also what made it kind of like for me even more um I guess poignant to choose that particular film, because the film is already in its original form an experiment with new electronic media, and it kind of like made sense to me to take this and to go even further.
Mm.
Um, Also, of course, the birds that are attacking in this scene that I distort, also the birds are just like a technical construction. They are not there. And the effect is, to today's standards, for today's viewers, looks rather bad.
Mm.
But I think actually, also viewed from from our time, it it becomes actually more and more interesting, because like the glitchiness or the obvious artificiality of these birds can become almost like a, yeah, again, like an experimental intervention. It seems more and more as if it's exactly the way it should look, and
Mm.
you should think about kind of like, where are these birds actually located? Because, and again, this would be like a metaleptic effect. It seems like these birds are not even actual part of the story, but they literally come from outside. They come out of a film studio and are attacking they are put on this film and are attacking this film.
Yeah, it's they really have it's maybe not like a horror effect, but it's I find it so unsettling and hard to watch. Like it I don't it's like I think it works honestly. Like yeah.
Yes, also a weird, kind of like a weird combination of like real life and animation film that you have like a feeling something, yeah, actually really disturbing. And that, to recognize this aspect of experimentation, that made me appreciate this film more. But also it was also what I felt it that lends this film to further experimentation. So in a way, I would claim, although it looks as if I'm destroying the Hitchcock film, I am at the same time only kind of like underlining what the original film already does. So hopefully, when you also go back to the original, you would perhaps like also see that effects that are very much like in the foreground in my piece are actually already at work in the original.
I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, I think this work definitely made me appreciate the birds more because I think it kind of maybe falls into that category of Hitchcock film that it's so focused on kind of the parable at play or the symbolism or childhood trauma memories, which you hear about all the time. But it definitely made me appreciate that level of experimentation, and you're drawing out its kind of best qualities by kind of meeting it where it is, in a sense. And so I want to ask you about, we've been circling around all of these ideas of attacking, right? Attacking is going on in the scene. Hitchcock's attacking the film. You're attacking Hitchcock's film. The signals are attacking. So on a philosophical level, what do you see this piece doing with regard to like because I guess I'm more interested in kind of your scholarly interpretation of what you're doing because that is at play here in addition to kind of the experimental filmmaker side of you that's going on here. So how does this relate to your scholarly thinking and what your interests are?
Well, maybe that it could serve as a meditation on, or inspiring a meditation on question of like if signals are ultimately also always forms of attack, signals reaching us, to what extent they are also connected with an experience of like as if they're doing violence to us. And I think um, the sound level um, of my video, which is certainly kind of like as important as the visual level, the sound is very aggressive. But all the sounds you hear is actually just the electromagnetic sound that is produced by the computer on which you are watching this piece, by the video recorder which played when I made, on which the birds played, the cathode ray tube on which I watched it, even the sound of the iPhone that is recording all this. I recorded these sounds with an electromagnetic microphone and used that as soundtrack. So it could make it could make us think about that these sounds that I'm making audible here, they are actually around us all the time. There's a screaming going on that we are just not aware. Um, but then sometimes other forms of being are aware of that. I remember that with my glitchy video experiments on the cathode ray tube. I remember that at some point our cat walked into my study and was shocked because the cat obviously heard extreme distressing frequencies that were coming out of the of my TV that I did not hear.
Mm,
So in a way, it also, yeah, it's that is certainly also something I find fascinating to think about, like these signals that are around us but that we are not aware of. I am I'm here also referring to artists like the German composer and artist to make these like electromagnetic sculptures, Christina Kubisch, and she still is also very much like working on. She makes, for example, these electromagnetic walks in which she kind of like has an audience walking with specific headphones in a city to have them realize that actually there are sounds around that normally we're not aware of, and this gives you a whole different kind of like understanding of a cityscape, and and yeah, and puts into question also this, again, very big philosophical question of like the differentiation between signal and noise. What is a signal and what is not a signal? And actually, as the like electronic media tell us, um, it cannot actually be separated, but you
mm,
can turn noise into signal, and signal can easily be considered noise. It
mm,
really depends who the recipient is.
mm. It's reminding me of, this is kind of what I do in my day job, but thinking about, sorry, someone's ringing the doorbell to my apartment.
That's all these accidents you kind of like
um,
have
is,
to.
we are as a planet constantly sending out signals and noise to space, and a single transmission of like "I Love Lucy" can be heard well into space, and it kind of really gets you thinking about all of these ways that we are kind of indicating our humanity in our existence without really knowing it through the technology that we're creating. And then also just thinking about the birds, like there's kind of this kind of creepy accumulating birds in the background, in the same way that behind your television are all these sounds and things that you don't understand. So I think there's is that kind of it really makes the technology feel alive in the way that you are manipulating it in this piece.
Mhm.
um, and I think one of my favorite moments comes at the end when we actually get to see your hands kind of manipulating the equipment, and so we kind of see you as the puppet master, but we also see you kind of, it's almost like the technology becomes an extension of your person.
Yeah,
And so could you talk about just like your decision to include that at the end and what function you think it's performing?
yeah. Yes, that was very important to me also to, in the end credits, to make clear that everything we see and hear is this is not a plugin, this is not digitally manufactured, but this is actually just like electronic signals that are bent. Now, why is this important? It could easily look exactly the same. I mean, these glitches, video effects, all that, we now have this as plugins in libraries. But what interests me here is absolutely not, it's not the look that I'm interested in, but I'm interested in the fact that the machines are actually doing something, and they're doing something that I, in contrast to a plugin that I do not control, I am certainly involved in, because I am kind of like turning these knobs, but I'm not fully controlling it. And this is an idea that I actually take from philosophy of technology, of like people like Gilbert Simondon, or later Bruno Latour, who kind of like we're working on this question of like that we misunderstand technical objects if we think they are just like a means to a certain end, if we think technical objects are just something that are completely automatic and controllable, but rather they make a plea for that technical objects always have what Simondon would call a range of uncertainty, that kind of like technical object also does something that no one could have foreseen, and that is actually something to embrace. So I love it if it looks, if you think it felt as if I'm also fusing with these devices. Also, I feel that the work with technical objects, I see it much more like dancing, that I'm dancing with these machines. And like in a dance, it's not just one person that choreographs it, but rather you have to react to what the other participant gives you. And that is something that was important. And then also finally, to take this really seriously, there's like the contribution of the machines. That was also the reason why in video essays, we at the end, we of course always reference the film material that we used. But normally we do not reference the machines with which we made the video essay. And that was also important to me, that I mentioned the video mixer, that I mentioned the electromagnetic microphone by name, because they were not just tools, they were participants
Mm,
in this performance.
I love that, and it's. I think it's important to, or at least I felt that this video I needed to watch it several times because I think kind of the first time watching it, I was so engaged by the image, and then you kind of realize through watching like, oh wait, the sound is, I need to pay attention to the sound, so I'm going to watch it again. And then the third time was kind of thinking about kind of your imagining your body at work moving this. And I love what you say about acknowledging the machines. I think that's essential context in making this stuff, right? Um,
And for, yeah.
in couple just a couple more questions here for you, but um, we mentioned earlier that typically, you just post your work to Vimeo and are very much operate in that, in our, broader kind of video essay, recycled cinema, found footage online community. But this work for you was screening at festivals, which is, been very exciting to see that you've been screening your work, all of your various works, more and more in person. Um, and so why was it important for you to kind of go through a more, I guess, standard exhibition process for this work? And what was it like? How was it received, to your knowledge?
What I love about this is that also the change of venues, the change of context. It's really a change of dispositif, and that also influences and changes the piece. Um, so with that particular one, what I like about it is kind of like it's at the same time actually almost a very classical piece of video art. It looks actually also very old school. Um, yeah, obviously, kind of like referencing like a style of like some video art from the 70s. Um, Yet at the same time, it is for me also very much like linked to film studies questions, and also very specific about this film and about like the discussion about like the production of this of this particular film, and the question of like also the question of like media change, things that we just discussed, like the change from film to video, from visual media to electronic media, things like that. And what I like about it is kind of that this particular film seems to go kind of like to the extremes in in both realms. And I actually had the situation that I showed it in the context of an academic lecture,
Mm.
and it was kind of like it was and it was at the end of like of a whole lecture on film studies and film analysis and all that, and how this could look like. And the audience appreciated it and said, yeah, we see the connection to film studies questions, but this is a weird piece because this is like an experimental film. And then when I showed it at an experimental film festival, I had the reaction, oh, we really like this piece. It's kind of like a very kind of like the whole the sound and the visuals, and I see like the tradition where this comes from. But this is also a strange piece because you have at the beginning you have like this conversation between Truffaut, um, Hitchcock, and Helen Scott, and you have actually at the end references, so it's almost also like a study piece, like an academic piece, and I really love that.
Yeah.
So 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 I try to get my video essays also into festivals, um, not for career reasons. For that, kind of like the pieces are probably too weird or do not function for a very large audience. But what interests me, and the reason why I'm doing this, is really just to see how a piece changes, um, just due to the environment in which it is shown.
Mm. I love that so much. And it's so it's funny how just adding, like, if you were to almost isolate, like if you were to just cut out the text at the beginning and end, right? Like those, I think maybe it's just making me think about how perhaps we maybe sometimes underappreciate like the value and the context that like those carry a lot of weight. Like even just you adding for research purposes at the end, that's not just a way to like cover yourself in a fair use sense, but it is associating yourself with a certain, I guess, not only your own professional background but also certain academic filmmaking or videographic criticism movements, right? Like it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I also like the fact how then for me something that I particularly like enjoyed was I was thinking about, that I thought I want to include quotations by Hitchcock about the experimental side of the birds. And I knew, of course, I would have like these quotations from the Hitchcock Truffaut conversation. But then I thought, wait a minute, actually, we have access to the tapes
Hmm.
of this conversation. So instead of writing it on the screen as a quotation or as an epigraph, I could have Hitchcock saying that himself. And then when I listened to the tapes, I remembered, I got kind of like aware again that, of course, what is so beautiful about these tapes is it's not just Truffaut and Hitchcock, but Helen Scott as a translator, because Truffaut did not speak English and Hitchcock not French. And so in this recording, we have already what is on the one hand like a meta commentary on the production of a film. It's at the same time almost like a little artistic piece itself, because it made me think about like these different voices that are interacting, and the fact that it is magnetic tape, an electronic medium itself again. And it's kind of like it almost felt like too good to be true, that
Yeah.
here's a filmmaker talking about electronic media he's interested in, but we're listening to him on an electronic tape. And actually, it's not just him, but we're listening to him and also to a voice, of a person that is so often also kind of like overlooked. Again, like speaking of signals that we do not pick up on, I really think it's a shame, that we are not aware of like the importance that Helen Scott played
Yeah.
for this famous conversation between Truffaut and Hitchcock.
I love that. And yes, the kind of the layering of their voices is so wonderful. The tapes are so great. And also I think, one of the things that's interesting in going back to the tapes is that they sometimes don't match up with the interview, right? Because the interview is obviously edited. And so you for this piece in particular, and just thinking about the nature of, I don't know if maybe this tape syncs up exactly with the text, I'm not sure. But we kind of get that there's almost a performative aspect to that as well, and an unvarnished quality, a casual quality, which is so great. And also I think your inclusion of that, and as far as we're kind of navigating these subtle differences, I would say the inclusion of that is a gesture that directly points us to think about how your experimentation is helping us understand the work itself, rather than just using the raw materials to create a new found footage work, which, if again, if we needed to divide into categories, that might be the difference between, right, videographic criticism and an experimental avant-garde film.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Also, something that that there is a brief glimpse of like a hand reaching and turning a knob, and of course it would make sense just like as found footage to kind of like, because that is then when kind of like my experiment starts.
Mhm.
But for me it was important that it's actually the hand of Oscar Sala, of the person who made the sound for the birds.
Oh
So this
wow,
kind of like this paradox of like, as if like Oscar Sala 70 years later is kind of like turning the knob on this
okay.
video.
And giving credit to folks associated with the film and the conversation, and who so often do not. Johannes, thank you so much for joining us today on Recycled Screenings. We could talk about it, talk about this work forever. And so, if you're watching this video, maybe you're watching it on YouTube, please go to recycledscreenings.com, where Johannes's work is available streaming, as well as a short statement that he wrote about the film, and a statement by me that at the time of this recording I haven't written yet, but it will be done. And please go and check out all of Johannes's work. I will link to that, as well as his videographic research project and all the other amazing things that he's doing. Johannes, thank you so much for being here.
I thank you.